All right, so without further ado, I think we will begin. The webinar is planned for 25 minutes only, so there is not much time to spare. So welcome everyone. Again, it's our second webinar in the SPM series. Today we will discuss an exciting topic of managing strategic portfolio with complexity with a 360-degree view. So a few logistics information in the beginning. The webinar, as said, will last for approximately 25 minutes. We'll take your questions towards the end of the session. The session also will be recorded, and you will be. I will email you the recording along with the presentation. And I guess that's it. Short round of introductions. My name is Christoph. I'm one of the co-founders at Quistorp, SPM technology and consulting house. And together with me is Jakub, who is the other co-founder and CEO at Quistorp.
Good morning.
Hello, Jakub. Good morning. So what do we have quite a few exciting points of the agenda about SPM. But maybe before we jump to those points, Jakub, it would be great to remind some of the attendees today, and for some it will be a kind of a new and fresh information, what actually SPM is and what it is not. So would you mind starting, please, and let me share the screen now. All right. Hopefully you all can see the screen, and I'm just on the right slide probably, Jakub, for you. So let's begin with a short introduction about SPM.
Thank you, Krzysztof. So this is like a very brief recap of the previous webinar. How we consider, how we understand SPM, strategic portfolio management, is mostly as an information management process. So actually SPM facilitates information flow and helps to build criteria, helps to communicate, helps to basically transform this information into decisions. So usually this is like a very basic and simplified diagram showing different actors which may be involved in the process. So starting from top management, who creates the strategy, who says where should we go, what kind of directions the company should take. Operations, who then fulfill these strategic directions with proposals, with initiatives, strategic initiatives, and then the back office functions, project management office responsible for project execution, and finance and business control to support the economic viability of the project. So those are the usual actors which may be involved, and SPM is in the middle and helps to facilitate information flow, helps to create the framework for the process, framework for criteria for decision making, for reporting. So we consider SPM as an information management process. So SPM usually doesn't make the decision by itself, but it creates an environment for efficient decision making. If I may ask you, Krzysztof, to move.
Right. So now that we know that SPM is actually in the center, it's like a process, not only set probably of one tool or one department only, but actually what we observe, Jakub, also working with many different clients, that when they talk about SPM, they also consider various type of initiatives, right? That are of different types, of course, with different characteristics. So would you mind taking us through those examples, please? And let me just quickly change the slide to the second one.
Yes, unfortunately, SPM is usually quite complex topic, and of course it is different from organization to organization, from industry to industry. But today we would like to discuss several very basic things which needs to be considered and taken into account to make this process more efficient. One of the angles is definition of different project types you are looking at in your SPM, and one of the most basic and traditional yet very efficient way of characterizing your different initiatives is through risk and return perspective. So project classification or initiative classification through risk and return perspective may look more or less like that. So on the left side, you have replacement or mandatory type of initiatives, which are used to basically support your business going concern. So if you think about traditional manufacturing business, this may be a replacement of your production assets. And the risk and return profile is usually on both axes very low. So you are not risking too much, or even the risk levels are very, very low, and you're not getting any returns on that. And as you move along this curve, then you may have operational excellence type of initiatives, and this is like a slogan which is mostly about cost down activities. So basically making your existing operations more efficient, less cost consuming. Therefore, some organizations call it cost down. Then organic growth are the core investments, increasing your capacity, basically expanding your capabilities. Then we may have mergers and acquisitions, and at the end, research and development or new product development, or even higher on this curve, research and technology. So those, of course, this is like very simplified example, and it may be called differently and maybe not fully relevant to every industry, but this is just to show you that one of the ways to classify different initiatives in your portfolio, which is very important, is to understand or look at them through risk and return perspective. And this may be one of the fundamental steps in your portfolio building and portfolio prioritization. Therefore, and understanding that comes with different KPIs or metrics, which should be used then, different ways of interpreting the results. So this has a lot of implications. If you create this kind of matrix of different project types, there are implications for measuring the efficiency, for creating proper KPIs, and also to create cross sections for your portfolio. So risk and return profiles may be a good way to think about your different product types in your portfolio. If you look at the whole enterprise, it may more or less look like that. If you are more streamlined into R&D, for example, you may also use the same matrix to let's say differentiate between different initiatives. Example from R&D may be value and growth kind of products. So growth kind of products are more innovative, while value are more traditional bread and butter types of projects. So risk and return is very important way of which can be used to classify your initiatives and projects in your strategic portfolio.
Right. So it's a SPM is also like about gentle risk versus return game, right? Balancing game, really. So you should have a proper balance of your portfolio. Of course, you will have some replacement projects, type of mandatory, because you have to do them. And then it's the question how much risk you're willing to take to start, for instance, new NPD initiatives versus, I don't know, like growing organically. But now let's jump, maybe, Jakub, shortly to the portfolio as a process that covers the entire life cycle, that should combine KPIs at different stages, really. What would be your elaboration on that aspect, so that you really start with an idea, and regardless of whether it's organic growth type of initiative or R&D, you still start in the same place, and the end game is an asset, right? And all the way you sort of have a process, and you're sort of collecting the KPIs as you move along, right? How do you do that? How do you combine those?
So this is basically the second extremely important angle you need to consider. So the first one related to different types of initiatives and their different risk and return profile is the first one. And the second one is the life cycle and the stage of evolution. So basically, at different stage of the life cycle, you should also take into account different metrics, different approach. So this is like another angle. So if you have a project of certain type, let's say R&D project, idea stage R&D project is slightly different in your portfolio management process than execution stage or project stage R&D. So therefore, it also has implications on the way you are assessing and on the way you are measuring the efficiency, and also the way you are making your decisions. So the first angle, different project types or initiative types, and the second angle is the stage on the life cycle, which also comes with different uncertainty levels and different information levels about what you are doing and what is the precision of your thinking. Let's call it this way. So evolution and let's say stage evolution, life cycle evolution is the second very important angle to differentiate, to include in your portfolio thinking.
So on the previous slide, what we saw that the R&D or the product development types of initiatives were the highest risks, but probably highest return as well. But what we probably can see here that the risk is the highest in the beginning of the process, right? Where you do not really know that.
I would correct Krzysztof. It's more about uncertainty. Right. So I think that at the very early stage we are facing more uncertainty because let's say if we imagine a real life example at the idea stage, we may think, okay, this product may be very interesting to us. This let's say path may be very interesting to us, but we have very little intelligence about it. Therefore, the uncertainty is relatively high. And as we go through this process, as we learn more across decision gates, we are getting more wise, we are getting more intelligence, and therefore the uncertainty level is reduced. I'm very let's say sensitive about this risk and uncertainty differentiation, because risk is something which we can identify, which we can measure, and which we can mitigate, while uncertainty is much more difficult to mitigate, or even impossible to mitigate, and basically it's not that let's say manageable.
All right, so uncertainty is something that we are not even at the moment yet aware of, and still we need to somewhat manage it, right? So
the managing uncertainty is mostly about accepting it or not.
All right, but you accept it when you have the right data, that you collected the right amount of data and of the right quality at every stage, right, of the process, so that you can like consciously accept the uncertainty and move forward, right?
Yes.
Okay, so now that we know that there are those two dimensions, one of different initiative types and balancing the risk versus reward. And the second dimension is really about the life cycle, because in SPM we do not focus that much on the execution itself. I mean, on the actual project that should result in an asset, but we focus on the entire life cycle from an idea to an asset, and the asset is a living organism, really. So it's a life cycle management in the context of SPM as well. All right, but now let's jump to the third point on our agenda, which is about prioritizing your portfolio. Because once you know that you have all of those different initiative types and there are different stages and there is uncertainty, at some stages there will be also a risk probably for some of those, I mean, different aspects. But how do you go about prioritizing your portfolio?
Yes, so of course there are many different techniques to prioritize strategic portfolio. This one is only a very simple, traditional, yet I still think very efficient way of thinking about prioritization, and this also relates to the previous angles we have been discussing. So this is an approach based on mandatory and discretionary initiatives or projects. By mandatory, we mostly understand those initiatives which are which are critical to our business continuity. So if you consider regulatory investments, mandatory investments, basically, which you need to do to sustain your existing business. So they're like tier one, and you start with building your portfolio with those kind of initiatives, and you clearly differentiate those from discretionary. So those discretionary, or sometimes called growth investments, they are, of course, extremely important for your value creation, but they are not mandatory. So you may or you may not decide to do them. And inside of this discretionary bucket, you may create a process based on risk and reward by allocating through different project classes and risk and reward types, allocating your let's say resources like from bottom up. So we start with low-hanging fruits, for example, and we are deciding to spend part of our available resource or the budget for that, and then on top of that would be more risk, and then even more risk to clearly identify what is the risk of our portfolio against of course the reward. Of course, those proportions here, which we will show, they are only an example, and they are not any kind of golden rule or any kind of rule you should apply or not. This is only an example, but this is like a clear process in which you may actually build up your portfolio, and then of course change, discuss, reiterate, and maybe you have more appetite for risk or less appetite for risk. But this is like one way, traditional, quite efficient way of prioritizing your portfolio, building up your portfolio.
Right. So this balance, I mean, this proportion, as you said, it may and it should actually change as you take your different initiatives throughout the life cycle and you gather more data. So it might be that a project that was considered high risk in the very early stage now seems to be like a moderate risk or even a low-hanging fruit for your organization, right? That may happen as you move along too. I also think that this, all right, so you wanted to comment a little bit.
I just wanted to add here that even though, let's say, there are all those very modern trends with regard to, let's say, thinking about your organization, and we are all in with that, and we also think that they're extremely interesting and nice. But at the end of the day, still the business is measured in monetary terms. So each business needs to earn money, and money is always considered through risk and return perspective, and this still holds. I mean, this is the end game which we are playing. Of course, the way we are getting there, it may be very different, but at the end, business is measured in monetary terms, and all companies need to provide returns for their shareholders. And therefore, this approach, which is traditional, always is, let's say, always holds. Of course, I mean, the details and the ways might be different in between, but the end game is about risk and return still.
Right. Thank you for that. We still have a couple of minutes left, and before we jump to the last point on our agenda, which is quite exciting, and it will be about efficient frontier. I know that you have prepared one slide that shows a very nice graphical representation of this kind of 360-degree type of analysis, right? This one I'm showing right now. So maybe would you mind elaborating a little bit more? What do we see here? What does this IRVD aspect means, and all the dots with arrows and so on?
Yes, this relates to the previous webinar during which we have discussed those different tools which you can use in portfolio process. And this is actually a portfolio view which hopefully in a clear way combines those different types of metrics, different types of data and information in one consistent view. So basically we are using this XY approach, which is very popular in many different use cases, which helps to position, for example, product development, or which helps to position strategic competitive positioning. It is used widely, basically in management. And we use this XY approach to show risk rating on the Y-axis on this example, and strategic impact rating on the X axis to position risk against strategic value. And then additional dimensions of information may include, for example, economic value, which may be represented through the size of the bubbles. And we may use relative KPIs like profitability index to easily visualize, so that is easily comparable, where does the value come from, which projects are bringing the most value. And lastly, we are also showing the dependency layer, which shows the complexity and different interrelations between projects in your portfolio, so that you are not, let's say, omitting important information from interrelated projects. So actually this view combines 4 different types of information, starting from qualitative strategic impact rating, which is like a scoring system, risk rating, value, which represents the more traditional NPV kind of economic modeling information, and dependencies, which shows you the complexity and the clusters which you are actually creating in your portfolio, so that you are not missing any important, let's say, relationships inside. And this kind of view, if it's possible to create, is usually extremely important in decision making. So this may be fundament for the decision making boardroom kind of discussions.
And what we can see also, you can set some thresholds, right? And like what projects at what levels are you accepting or not, and how they may relate to other projects that are below your threshold, for instance. But before we, I think we will very slowly be jumping to the Q&A session. But before we do that, last but not least, by no means, is the portfolio efficient frontier, Jakub. This is the end game of all SPM. Seems very quite advanced, quite complex, but would you mind elaborating on what it actually means and what kind of value it may bring to an organization?
This portfolio efficient frontier is a specific use case of Markowitz's portfolio theory, quite interesting theory, which is quite, let's say, capital market related in most cases. We use it in the context of strategic portfolio management, so slightly different use case, but the rule is the same. So the curve you are seeing here is actually the curve of your optimal portfolios, unlimited number of optimal portfolios, which are moving along the X, which represents resources, budget, or other constraints, and Y, which represents value. So by value, we may understand economic KPIs, strategic ratings, or a combination of those. And of course, the budget and resources, they are your constraints, because all the companies, they have limited resources. So they want to optimize the use of those resources. So for any given budget on the X-axis, you can create an optimal project or initiative set, which should your strategic portfolio contain, so that you may actually research whether moving left or right on the budget and resource axis creates appropriate and acceptable marginal value increase. So basically, it's like an optimization tool, which based on defined criteria, based on defined objective maximization criteria, helps you to build those optimal sets of projects which should maximize your value for a given budget or resource available. So this is like a interesting tool which helps to facilitate those discussions. Should we increase the budget, or maybe we should slightly decrease because the marginal increase we are getting is not sufficient, not acceptable for us.
Yeah, and then you probably have all the arguments necessary for the people that are submitting the projects that are not accepted, that the marginal value increase is just too low, for instance, and instead we should focus on something else. I think right now it will be great time, Jakub, to take some of the questions. So I'll read the first out loud. Our high-level strategic goals in our company are based on three things: sustainability, innovation, and international growth. To get a 360-degree view, how many questions, for example, things to assess and judge, do you typically have to cover this type of strategic areas? Again, sustainability, innovation, international growth.
I mean, there are no answers without getting to know more details to that, and there is no, like, again, golden rule, but basically sustainability, innovation, and international growth from this kind of scoring perspective, strategic impact scoring perspective, they are core directions. And inside of those core directions, you should probably include some of the questions so that the answers you're getting, the scoring you're getting is relevant and meaningful. Of course, you should look for let's say reducing complexity. So basically the number of questions you should look for is the least number of questions which make those answers meaningful. So I would guess that I may only relate to other experiences, other let's say examples I have, that usually the number of factors or questions in this kind of strategic fit or strategic impact analysis is usually around 10 to 15.
Right. So I'm probably also, I know that you won't like the answer. I mean, the people who asked this question, the person that asked this question, but it probably depends, but typically is 10 to 15. Maybe the second question, Jakub. We have many projects in our company, and I think that our challenge is to find time to deselect many projects that are not so important. Is this tool helpful also for deselection of many projects, or typically used to find the most important among the top projects? It's a very good
essence of this tool. So basically, it is meant for prioritizing, so setting the rank, and also deselecting or basically parking or putting on hold or even canceling projects. Absolutely, yes.
Right. And the last question: many of our product-related projects are incremental improvements, but we would like to have more focus on more disruptive improvements. Uncertainty is what we know much higher when we have disruptive changes and hard to understand and judge. Could your way of working help us to get more focus on disruptive improvements, to dare to invest in more disruptive changes? A very good question as well.
Very good and very interesting. I think we will have a next session about exactly trying to measure, understand uncertainty. So that probably the answer will be shown or discussed during the next webinar in more details, and hopefully we will be able to show some tools to understand this uncertainty and therefore justify more disruptive improvements with more uncertainty in a clear and transparent way.
And very good. Already advertisement at this stage of our next session, which is planned next week, Tuesday, 8:30 a.m. We always plan to finish 8:55, but we haven't managed so far, but I hope you don't mind us finishing 5 minutes late. That concludes today's session. I would like to thank you all for joining. At this stage, again, I invite you very warmly to register for our next webinar. I'll be sharing with you the links and necessary logistics. So hope you can make it. I hope you enjoyed today's session. Thank you, Jakub, for a great discussion. Thank you all for great questions. I wish you all have a great day and great weekend ahead.
Thank you all. Thank you, Krzysztof. Take care. Bye-bye.